The pregnancy test wasn't hidden in a drawer. It was sealed inside a hollowed art catalog. Yara Whitfield is 28, a black woman, a former archival cataloger for a private fine art collection, a quiet reader of documents nobody thought to watch. Now she is the wife of Seo Tae-hyun, 34, the operational boss they call the Quiet One. A black koi tattoo climbs the left side of his neck. He wears tailored charcoal and a steel watch. She wears sage knit and a warm brown band across her forehead. She should be happy. Instead, she watches the courtyard. A gray sedan has parked there for the third morning. That night, an envelope arrives. No sender. Inside, a photocopy of her own pregnancy result. One line, handwritten. Someone already knows. She doesn't tell Taehyun. His reaction would wake the whole organization. Then the small things begin. The sedan returns. A new guard is always one room too close. Her prenatal vitamins vanish from the cabinet. Nothing she can prove. A silence grows between them. He reads it as distance. She calls it protection. But the envelope wasn't a threat. And the person she was hiding the baby from wasn't the one she should have feared. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Yara's thumb pressed the plastic stick flat against her sternum before the second line finished bleeding into pink. She already knew. She'd known for 9 days, the way a body knows weather. But she waited by the bathroom counter until the window on the test went quiet and certain, and then she wrapped it in a square of toilet paper, folded once, folded twice, small enough to disappear. The apartment was still dark. Taehyun slept behind the bedroom door, and the door was closed, and she meant to keep it that way. She carried the little package down the hall on flat feet. 60 square meters of glass and pale stone, and she moved through it without a sound, because she had learned in 3 years that sound traveled in this house, and someone was always listening for it. The kitchen. Not the kitchen. The trash there got searched. Not by him. By the ones who cleaned, who counted, who reported. She kept walking. The art catalog sat on the low shelf under the window, thick as a brick, glossy, the kind of book nobody opens twice. She'd hollowed the center of it herself 2 weeks ago with a craft knife, page by page, a square well cut down through 400 pages of Rothko and light. A hiding place she had built before she had anything to hide. She had told herself it was nothing, a habit, a woman making a small private space in a house that had none. Now she had something to put in it. She lifted the cover. The folded thing went into the well. She pressed the cover down and set a ceramic bowl on top, the way it always sat, and she stepped back and looked at the shelf, and it looked like a shelf. Good. Her heart was doing something high and fast under the ribs, and she put her palm there and breathed until it slowed. Then she went to the window, because that was the other thing she did every morning now. The glass ran floor to ceiling, 14 floors down. The street was gray and empty in the light before sunrise, the shuttered storefronts, the one delivery scooter idling at the corner. She didn't look at any of that. She looked at the car, gray sedan, parked across the street, nose pointed south, one space back from the fire hydrant so the traffic camera wouldn't tag it. Third morning, same car, same space, same tinted windshield holding the streetlight so she couldn't see who sat behind it, if anyone sat behind it at all. The first morning, she'd told herself it was a neighbor's. The second morning, she'd counted the other cars on the block, and none of them repeated, and that one did. This was the third morning. She had stopped telling herself things. She stood very still at the glass with her arms crossed under her chest, and she watched it, and it watched the building, and neither of them moved. Behind her, the coffee machine clicked and began to hiss. She'd set it the night before out of habit. The smell filled the room, and it turned her stomach now, in a way it hadn't a month ago, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and swallowed and kept her eyes on the car. A light came on 2 floors down and across, someone else's window, someone else's ordinary morning. The sedan didn't react. It only sat there, patient as furniture, and she understood suddenly and completely that patience was the point. Whoever it was wanted her to see it. A car that meant to hide would hide. This one wanted to be counted, morning after morning, until the counting did the work. She uncrossed her arms and let them fall. There was a life inside her now that was the size of a lentil, and there was a car outside that had been sent to remind her of what that life was worth to people she had never met. And the 2 facts sat in her at the same time, and she couldn't make them into one feeling. She tried. She stood there and tried. Down the hall, the bedroom door opened. She heard it, the particular soft catch of that hinge, and her whole body reorganized itself before she'd decided anything. Arms loose, face smooth. She turned from the window with a cup already in her hand, though she hadn't poured it yet, and she set it under the machine and pressed the button as if she'd been about to all along. Taehyun came into the front room barefoot. Black sweater, dark trousers, the koi climbing the left side of his neck out of the collar, black ink, tail vanishing under the wool. His hair wasn't combed yet. That was the only unguarded thing about him at this hour, the hair, and she had learned to read the whole man by it. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He crossed to the window, the same window, and she felt something cold slide down through her, and she busied her hands with the cup, so she wouldn't turn to see whether he saw the car. He stood there a moment. His eyes went out over the street. She heard the small sound of him breathing, even, unbothered. "It's going to rain," he said. "Is it?" "Sky's wrong for this hour." He turned back into the room. He hadn't seen it. Or he'd seen it, and folded it away somewhere she couldn't reach, which was the thing he did with everything, and she would never know which. That was the marriage, 2 people keeping the same secrets in separate rooms. He came to the counter, and she handed him the cup, the one she'd made, and took none for herself, and he noticed. He noticed everything. His eyes moved over her once, quick and total, the way they moved over a room he was entering. "You're not drinking coffee." "Stomach's off." "Since when?" "Since I woke up." She smiled at him, and it came out real enough, because part of her was always glad to see him, even now, even this morning, and that was its own kind of danger. "It's nothing." He held the cup and didn't drink from it. He watched her over the rim. In the pale light, his face gave away nothing, and she thought, not for the first time, that she had married a locked door and spent 3 years learning to love the wood. "Eleanor called last night," she said, to move him off it. "My mother, she wants to visit in the spring." It worked. Something in his shoulders eased a fraction. "She's welcome, you know that." "I know. Send her the good flight, the direct one." He said it the way he said most kind things, like an instruction, like protection, was a thing you procured and delivered. She had stopped minding it, or she'd told herself she had. He set the cup down untouched and reached out and laid the flat of his hand against her cheek, and his hand was warm and dry and enormous, and she leaned into it before she could stop herself. "You'd tell me," he said, "if something was wrong." Not a question. His thumb moved once along her cheekbone. "There's nothing wrong," she said. And the lentil turned in her, and the car sat down in the street, and she looked up into the face of the one person in the world she wanted to tell and could not, and she held the lie in her mouth, and it tasted like the coffee she couldn't drink. He kissed her forehead, above the wide band of brown cloth she wore across it, and he went to shower, and the bathroom door shut, and the water started. She let out a breath that shook on the way. She didn't go back to the window right away. She made herself wash the untouched cup and set it in the rack. She wiped the counter that didn't need wiping. She opened the refrigerator for no reason and looked at the cold light and the neat rows of things and shut it again. Ordinary, ordinary. She built the morning the way she built the hiding place, piece by careful piece, until it could hold weight. Then she went back. The car was still there. She stood at the glass and looked down, and this time, she didn't cross her arms, she didn't hide her belly, she just stood there and let herself be seen if she was being seen. A small act, a stupid one, but it was hers. Because here was the thing she had understood standing there, the thing she couldn't say to Taehyun and couldn't unknow. The child inside her had already been assigned a use. Not by her, not by the man in the shower who would have burned the city down to keep it safe. By the shape of the world they lived in. In 3 years, she had learned exactly what this family was, and exactly what a child of this family became. An heir, a seat at a table, a piece moved across a board by hands she would never see, in a game whose rules had been written before she was born. They would not look at the baby and see a baby. They would look and see leverage. And leverage was the one thing in this world that could not be protected. Only used, or spent, or taken. She had a good life, she knew it. She had the glass and the stone and the man and a mother who could fly first class to visit and never guess a thing. She had built a private well in a book and hidden a folded truth inside it, and for now the truth was hers alone, and being alone with it was the safest place it could be. She put her hand flat on the glass. Down below, far off, the first fat drops of rain hit the empty street, and then more, and the gray sedan sat under it, unmoving, waiting for a tomorrow that would come whether she watched for it or not. Behind her, the shower shut off. Behind her, the shower shut off. She thought about the book, the hollow one, and the 2 weeks it had taken her to make it. She'd done it at night, after he slept, sitting cross-legged on the bathroom floor, with the fan running to cover the sound of the blade, page by page. Rothko, then Klein, then 100 pages of some Italian nobody, all of it cut through the middle into a clean square hole. Her hands had ached. She'd swept the paper crumbs into a plastic bag and carried the bag out to a public bin 4 blocks away, because even paper crumbs in this house could be counted. She hadn't known then what she was building it for. She'd only known she needed one thing in the world that was hers, one sealed place no one had signed for. Now she knew. The body had known before the mind did. That was the part that frightened her, that some quiet animal in her had started digging a den before she'd even missed her period, as if it had smelled the danger coming up the stairs. The bedroom door again. Taehyun crossed the front room buttoning a shirt, and then the graphite jacket over it, the charcoal wool that made him look like something cut out of the skyline, and the koi disappeared entirely under the collar and the knot he never wore of a tie. He was a different man dressed. In the sweater, he was a husband. In the suit, he was the other thing, the thing the car in the street answered to. "I'll be late," he said. "There's a dinner. You don't have to wait up." "I never do." That earned her the smallest lift at the corner of his mouth, the closest thing he owned to a laugh before noon. He came and stood in front of her and fixed his cuff, and she reached without thinking and fixed the other one, and for a second, they were just 2 people getting one of them out the door, and it was almost unbearable, how normal it was. "Eat something," he said. "For the stomach." "I will." "Yara." He waited until she looked up. His eyes searched her face the way they searched a room for exits, and she held very still under it and gave him nothing, and after a moment, he decided to believe her, the way he decided most things, all at once and completely. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. There are people I can send." "I know there are." He heard the flat edge under it. He always heard, but he let it go, because letting things go was cheaper than opening them, and he kissed the top of her head above the band of brown cloth and picked up his phone and his keys, and he was gone, the door drawn shut soft behind him, the lock turning itself. She counted to 10, then she went back to the window. His car pulled out below, the long black one, the driver already at the curb, a second man she half recognized holding the rear door. Taehyun folded himself into the back seat without looking up at his own window, because he never looked up, because looking up was a thing that told watchers where you lived. The black car eased into the wet street and turned south and slid away under the rain. The gray sedan didn't move. She had thought it might. She'd let herself hope, in the stupid animal part of her, that it was there for him, for the man with the tattoo, the man with enemies, the man whose whole life was a series of cars that followed other cars. That would have been ordinary, that she could have lived with. But the black car was gone now, 3 blocks gone, and the gray one still sat in its space, with its nose pointed south, and its windshield full of rain, and it had not so much as rolled a tire. It wasn't watching him. It had never been watching him. It was watching the window she was standing in. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she flinched hard enough to knock her knuckles on the glass. Eleanor. The name glowed up at her, and a photo, her mother in the plum blouse laughing at something out of frame. She almost let it ring out. Then she thought of the flat voice she'd have to explain later, and she pressed it and lifted it to her ear and turned her back to the street. "There's my girl. Did I wake you?" "No, Mama, I've been up." "You sound thin." Eleanor could hear a lost pound over an ocean. "You eating? Is that man feeding you, or just guarding you?" "He feeds me." Yara pressed her spine to the cold glass. "He told me to send you the direct flight, in spring." "Did he?" A warmth came into her mother's voice, and a caution under it, the way it always did around Taehyun, the man she'd met twice, and prayed over more than twice. "Baby, you happy? You'd tell me if you weren't." Everyone wanted her to tell them. Not one of them wanted to hear it. "I'm happy," Yara said, and the word came out smooth, worn smooth from handling. "It's early here. Can I call you tonight?" "You always say tonight." "Tonight. I promise." A pause. The sound of her mother deciding, the same all-at-once way her husband decided, and it struck her that she was surrounded by people who loved her by choosing not to see her. "All right," Eleanor said. "You call me, and you eat. Whatever's got your stomach, you feed it anyway." "I will. I love you to the moon, Yara." "To the moon, Mama." She lowered the phone. Her hand was steady now. That was the frightening thing. How steady the hand got. How good she was becoming at this. How a person could stand in a glass box, 14 floors above a car, sent to price her unborn child, and keep her voice smooth enough to send her mother back to bed. She turned around. The rain was coming harder. The street ran silver, and in its space, unbothered, unmoving, patient as the thing it was, the gray sedan sat and waited for her to understand what it already knew, that the folded truth in the hollow book was not a secret she was keeping. It was a secret someone had already found. The intercom buzzed twice, then stopped. Yara pulled her hand back from the ceramic bowl on the shelf. She had been standing there again, doing the thing she'd promised herself she would stop doing, checking that the catalog hadn't moved, that the spine still sat flush against the others. The buzz came from the lobby panel by the door, the small screen that showed the delivery vestibule 14 floors down. She crossed the room and looked at it. Empty. Nobody stood in the frame. She pressed the answer key anyway. Static. The building did that sometimes. A phantom ring, when the wind pushed the outer door. She told herself it was the wind. The rain had thinned to a gray drizzle by afternoon, and the streets below had gone slick and quiet, and the gray sedan had finally pulled away at 4, just as she was starting to believe it lived there. She'd watched the empty parking space for an hour after, less relieved than she wanted to be. She let go of the answer key. The screen held its picture of nothing. Then a shape moved into the bottom of the frame, the crown of a delivery cap, a courier's shoulder, gone again before she could focus. The panel chimed. A line of text scrolled across it in the building's flat font. One item, Vestibule Locker 3, no signature required. Nobody sent things that needed no signature. Taehyun's world ran on signatures, on the record of who touched what and when. She stood with her thumb over the key for a long moment before she pressed it and told the empty screen she was coming down. The elevator smelled of someone else's cologne. She rode it with her arms folded, watching the floor numbers fall, and made herself breathe the way the pregnancy app had taught her, 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Her reflection swam in the brushed steel of the doors. The band across her forehead had slipped a half-inch, and she pushed it back into place without thinking. The vestibule was cold. Locker 3 sat at chest height, its little door ajar the width of a coin. Inside, a single envelope, propped upright against the metal, like it had been placed by someone with time to spare. Cream paper. No stamp, no return address. Her name across the front in blue ink, printed in careful capitals, the letters too even, as though the hand behind them had practiced. She didn't reach for it right away. She looked at the vestibule camera in the ceiling corner, the black dome that watched everyone who came and went. Then she looked at the outer door, at the street beyond the glass, empty in both directions. A bus sighed past. A man walked a small dog under an umbrella he didn't need anymore. She took the envelope with 2 fingers, the way she'd taught herself to take things that might matter later. It weighed almost nothing. She carried it to the elevator, and only when the doors had closed and the car had begun to climb did she turn it over. The flap was tucked, not sealed. Whoever sent it wanted it opened easily. She opened it in the elevator. She would think about that later, that she hadn't waited for the safety of her own 4 walls, that some animal part of her needed to know before the doors opened again and gave the world another chance to watch her face. 1 sheet inside, folded once. She unfolded it against the wall of the car. A photocopy, gray and grainy, the toner heavy along one edge. She knew the shape of it before her eyes finished the work. The little plastic wand, the 2 lines in the result window, the brand name half cut off at the top. Her test. Her exact test. The one wrapped in tissue and buried in 400 hollowed pages behind a ceramic bowl on a shelf in a room 14 floors up. Not a photo of a test like hers. Hers. Beneath the image, 1 line, the same blue capitals, the same practiced evenness. Someone already knows. The elevator stopped. The doors opened on her floor. She stood inside the car and the doors began to close again, and she put out a hand and stopped them, and stepped through into the hallway, on legs that had gone strange and far away. She got the apartment door open on the 2nd try. Inside, she didn't turn on the lights. She stood with her back against the door and held the sheet in front of her, and read the line again, and then a 3rd time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something she could survive. They didn't. The image didn't change. The 2 gray lines held their small, terrible certainty. She thought first, absurdly, of the trash 4 blocks away, the public bin where she'd fed the shredded pages of the catalog she'd hollowed. She had been so careful. She had run the fan. She had gone out at an hour when the halls were empty. She had touched the wrapped test only twice since, both times with the door locked and the blinds down. And someone had photographed it, or photographed one exactly like it. She couldn't tell which was worse. Her stomach turned over. The nausea had been coming most evenings this week, a slow tide that rose behind her breastbone, and it rose now, but she swallowed against it and held the sheet steady. She would not be sick. Being sick was a thing that happened to a body that had given up managing itself, and she was not going to give this over to her body. She crossed the dark room to the shelf. She had told herself she would not check. She checked. Her hand went up past the ceramic bowl and found the spine of the catalog, and she drew it down and opened it to the hollow, and there, tissue undisturbed, the plastic wand exactly where she'd left it. The 2 lines faded now, but still legible in the lamplight from the street. Nothing moved, nothing taken. Whoever had photographed it had put it back with a care that frightened her more than theft would have. Theft was hunger. This was patience. This was a person who wanted her to keep believing the hiding place was hers. She closed the book. She slid it back, flush against its neighbors, and she stood there, with her palm flat on the spine, and understood that the shelf was no longer a hiding place. It was a stage, and she'd been performing on it for 2 weeks, without knowing anyone was in the seats. Her knees found the floor. She sat with her back to the door and the sheet in her lap and made herself think, because thinking was the only room left in the house that the fear hadn't flooded yet. Who had been inside? The cleaner came Thursdays. A woman named Okja who had worked for the family 11 years and who wept at Chuseok and brought Yara pears wrapped in netting. The maintenance men who'd fixed the dishwasher in June. The 2 who had come to recalibrate the window sensors after the last security review. Taehyun's people. All of them. Vetted, bonded, watched. That was the point of this life. Everyone was watched. Nothing came in that hadn't been checked. And that meant the person who had stood over her hiding place and lifted a plastic wand into the light and pressed a button had passed through every layer of the thing that was supposed to keep her safe. She thought of the gray sedan, 3rd morning, nose south, 1 space back from the hydrant. She had assumed it watched. She had not let herself think about what a watcher does with what he sees. The phone in her pocket vibrated, and she nearly cried out. She dragged it free, her mother's face on the screen, the photo from 3 summers ago, Eleanor squinting into the sun on the porch in Savannah. Yara had promised to call tonight. She had said the words this morning, into the glass, with the rain starting. She looked at the smiling face and let it ring in her hand. 4 times, 5, and then the screen went dark, and a small icon told her the call had gone to voicemail, and she sat in the dark and hated herself for the relief. She couldn't do that voice right now. Eleanor could read her across an ocean. Eleanor had once known she'd failed a chemistry exam from the way she said hello. If Yara spoke to her mother in this minute, her mother would know, and then her mother would worry from 4,000 miles away, and worry was a thing Yara could not send home wrapped in netting like pears. She texted instead, thumbs slow and stupid on the glass. Long day, fell asleep early, call you tomorrow, to the moon. The reply came almost at once. A moon, a heart, to the moon and back, baby. Yara set the phone face down on the floor. She thought about Taehyun. He was at his dinner. He had told her this morning he'd be late, and late in his mouth meant hours, meant a private room and men who ate slowly and said little and measured one another over cold noodles. He would come home past midnight, smelling of soju he hadn't drunk, because he never drank at those tables, because he liked to be the one still sober when the others weren't. She could call him, she could send one word and the room would empty of everyone but the 2 who kept him safe, and the car would be at the curb in 90 seconds, and he would be here. And that was exactly why she didn't move. She made herself picture it, all the way to the end, the way she'd learned to picture things before she did them. She calls. He comes. She shows him the sheet. His face does the thing his face does. Nothing. Which is the most frightening thing it does. And then the machine starts. He would not shout. He would not pace. He would make 3 calls in a voice like a closing drawer. and by morning the apartment would be full of men with earpieces, and the cleaner Okja would be taken somewhere and asked questions in a room with no pears in it, and the maintenance logs would be pulled, and the window men would be found, and someone who might be guilty, someone who might only be unlucky, would answer for this with more than a job. He believed protection was control. She had married that in him, and she had loved it, and she had let it wrap around her like the warm dark of the catalog's hollow. But she understood, sitting on the floor with the proof of her secret in her lap, that his love moved in only one direction. It closed hands. It did not open them. And a man whose love closes hands, when he learns that his enemy has reached inside his own home and touched the softest thing in it, that man does not get careful. That man gets loud in the one way that cannot be taken back. Someone already knows, the sheet said. But the whole organization did not know. Not yet. If she told him, they would. His reaction would be a flare over a dark field, and everyone watching, and someone was always watching, would see exactly where the soft thing was buried, and how much it was worth, and how far a man would go to keep it. The person who sent this had counted on her telling him. She was almost sure of that. You do not photocopy a woman's hidden pregnancy test and slide it into a locker to inform her of what she already knows. You do it to move her, to make her afraid enough to run to the one person whose fear would light the whole thing up. Which meant the sheet was not a warning to her, it was a match, and she was meant to be the hand that struck it. She would not strike it. Her breathing had slowed without her noticing. The fear was still there, a cold weight low in her chest, but under it now was the other thing, the thing that had made her hollow a book before she knew why, the animal that digs the burrow before it understands the winter. She sat very still and let the plan assemble itself out of the dark, piece by piece, the way her eyes were assembling the furniture of the unlit room. She would say nothing, not tonight, not to him, not to her mother, not to the empty screen in the vestibule. She would carry it the way she carried everything, folded once, tucked in the pocket with the zipper. She would watch the watchers back. She would find out who had stood over her shelf, and she would find out why they wanted her husband loud, and she would do it in the one currency this family never thought a woman like her would spend: patience. She got up off the floor. She turned on a single lamp, the small one by the couch, and by its light she looked at the sheet one more time, all of it, the toner-heavy edge, the practiced capitals, the 2 gray lines. Then she went to the kitchen and took the fireplace matches from the drawer by the stove, the long ones they never used because the apartment had no fireplace, only the notion of one, a decorative surround, the developer had installed for people who bought views instead of warmth. She did not burn the sheet. She almost did. She stood over the sink with the match unlit in her fingers, and understood that the sheet was the only piece of the other person she held. Burn it, and she was blind again. Keep it, and she had a thread. She put the matches down. She found the shipping tube she'd saved from a framed print, cardboard, capped at both ends, long enough that it lived forgotten behind the coats in the hall closet. She rolled the sheet loose inside it, capped it, and stood it upright in the closet, behind the umbrellas, where a tube of cardboard was the most ordinary thing in the world. Not the hollow book, never 2 secrets in one grave. If someone came for the book, they would find the book. They would not find this. Then she went back to the window. The street was dark now, the drizzle gone entirely, the asphalt drying in patches under the sodium lamps. The space one back from the hydrant sat empty. She watched it for a long time, long enough that her reflection came up in the glass, the band across her forehead, the long dark hair down the left side of her body, the gold hoop catching the lamplight when she turned her head. Behind the reflection, the empty city. Behind the empty city, somewhere, the person who had counted on her being afraid. She was afraid. That part they'd gotten right. The other part they had gotten wrong. She pressed 2 fingers flat against the cold glass, over the empty parking space, the way you press a hand against a photograph of someone far away. Down in the lobby, 14 floors below, the intercom panel showed its picture of the empty vestibule, and locker 3 hung open the width of a coin, and the black dome in the ceiling watched the nothing with its patient electric eye. Her phone lit on the couch. A message from Taehyun. Home by 1. Eat something. She looked at it and did not answer right away. Then she typed back, already ate. Don't wake me. The lie went out into the dark with a small sound, and she stood at the window in the quiet apartment and waited for the space by the hydrant to fill again, and understood that from tonight forward, every true thing she felt would have to travel folded, in a pocket with a zipper, past the one man in the world whose fear could kill her by loving her too fast. The parking space stayed empty. She waited anyway. The gray sedan came back on the 4th morning, and this time it parked closer. Yara counted the spaces from the window, not one behind the hydrant now. Level with it, nose to the south the way it always aimed, but pulled forward enough that the driver could see the lobby doors without leaning. She pressed her thumbnail into the seam of the curtain and held it there. The engine ran. A thin ribbon of exhaust climbed the cold air and came apart. She did the thing she had trained herself to do all week. She looked at the clock, then back at the car, then wrote the time on the inside cover of a paperback she kept face down on the sill. 7:14. Below it, in the same small hand, 4 other numbers already sat in a column. 7:09, 7:22, 7:11, 7:16. Always within a quarter hour of the same slot. Whoever sent the car wanted her to know it kept a schedule. Taehyun's coffee had gone lukewarm on the counter. He drank it anyway, standing, reading something on his phone, the koi dark against his collar, where the top button stayed open. He had left the jacket over the chair. He did that when the day ahead was one he expected to run long. "You're up early," he said. "I didn't sleep much." He looked at her over the rim of the cup. He set it down. Again. "It's nothing." The word came out worn smooth from use. She heard it and hated the sound of it. Bad dreams. "I'll nap later." He crossed the room. He didn't ask about the window, and she didn't offer it. He tucked a loose strand of her hair back and let his hand rest a moment against the side of her neck, warm, and she felt her own pulse jump under his fingers and prayed he read it as anything but what it was. "Eat," he said. "For me." "I will." He gathered the jacket. At the door he paused the way he had every morning that week, one hand on the frame, and turned back. "There's a new man on the building detail. Bayek. You'll see him in the lobby. He's cleared." Her stomach dropped a level she hadn't known it could reach. Why a new man? Rotation. He said it flat, the way he said most things that were not the whole truth. Nothing's wrong. Then he was gone, and she stood in the quiet, listening to the elevator swallow him, and thought, that is my line. He has started using my line. She met Baek Min-jae at 11 because she made herself go down. Staying up in the apartment felt like waiting to be found. Moving felt like a decision, and she was collecting decisions the way other people collected reassurance. She took the elevator to the lobby with a canvas bag over her shoulder and her sunglasses on, and she saw him before the doors fully opened. He stood near the male alcove, thin black suit, hair spiked short, a fine silver line at one ear. His eyes moved before his head did, to her, to the elevator behind her, to the street doors, back to her, and something in the readiness of it made the hair on her arms lift. "Mrs. Seo," he gave a short bow. "Baek Min-jae, I'll be on the building this week." "So I hear. Going out? I can walk you to the car." "I'm walking." To the pharmacy on the corner. A flicker, barely anything. His weight shifted toward the doors. "I'll come. You don't need to. It's better, he said, and smiled, and the smile did not reach the moving eyes. She let him. There was no version of refusing that didn't turn a small thing into a large one, and she had decided, days ago, that she would not be the one to make anything large. So she walked and he walked, half a step behind and to her left, and at the corner he stopped when she stopped, and stood facing out at the street while she went in. The pharmacy was narrow and bright. She bought hand cream she didn't need, a bottle of water, a pack of the ginger candy that sometimes settled her stomach. She went to the shelf at the back, the one with the folic acid and the prenatal tablets, because she had 2 left in the bottle at home and needed more. The slot on the shelf where the brand she took should have sat was empty. Not sold out. The little price card was gone too, the way it goes when a store stops carrying something. She reached for a second brand, then she felt it, the way you feel a draft from a door opening behind you. She turned. Beck stood just inside the entrance now, not out on the street where she had left him. He was looking at the magazine rack. He was not reading anything. She put the second bottle back on the shelf. She bought the water and the candy and nothing else, and she walked out past him, and he fell in half a step behind and to her left, all the way home. That night, the bottle at home was gone. She kept the prenatal tablets in the bathroom cabinet, behind the box of plasters, low shelf, left side. She had put the bottle there herself 9 days ago and moved it exactly once. She opened the cabinet to take the day's tablet, and her hand found the plasters and the spare toothbrushes and the little pot of balm and no bottle. She took everything off the shelf. She lined it along the edge of the sink. She got down and looked at the tile under the cabinet, in case it had fallen. She checked the drawer, the other drawer, the shelf above. She checked the kitchen, though she had never once kept it in the kitchen, because a person who has started to doubt her own memory checks the places she knows are wrong. 2 tablets left in the bottle. The bottle simply not there. She sat on the cold edge of the tub and made herself breathe. There was an explanation that did not frighten her, and she reached for it and held it up to the light. Okaba had come Thursday. Okaba tidied, moved things, sometimes threw out what looked used up. A near-empty bottle. It was possible, but Okja put things back. 11 years, and Okja always put things back where they lived, and if she binned something, she left the empty on the counter first, so nobody would think it lost. There was no empty on the counter. There had been no empty in the bin, which Yara now knew because she went and looked, elbow deep, and found coffee grounds and a torn envelope and the rind of a melon and no orange plastic bottle at all. She stood at the sink with her hands smelling of the bin and understood the shape of what was happening to her. Not the sedan alone, not the new man alone, not the empty shelf at the pharmacy alone, or the empty shelf in her own cabinet alone. Each one, by itself, was nothing. Each one she could explain to a reasonable person in a sentence, and the reasonable person would nod. That was the design. Somebody was building her a house out of coincidences and inviting her to live in it and call it her own nerves. She dried her hands. She took one of the 2 remaining tablets. She put the other back and closed the bottle that wasn't there. Her hand actually moved to do it before she caught herself, closing air, and the small madness of that gesture scared her more than the missing bottle had. Taehyun came home at 9 and felt the wall before he saw it. He knew the apartment, the way he knew a room he was about to walk into for a meeting. He set his keys in the dish and went still, reading the air. Yara sat on the sofa with a book she wasn't turning. "You didn't eat," he said. "Not the food." He could see the kitchen from the door, and he had already counted it. The clean pan, the unopened rice, the water glass with the ring of ginger candy wrapper beside it. "I wasn't hungry." He hung his coat. He came and sat, not touching her, one cushion away, elbows on his knees. This was how he asked, when he had decided asking directly would fail. He waited. She wanted to tell him. The want was physical, a pressure behind the sternum, and she looked at the koi at his collar and the calm, heavy line of his eyes, and thought about how much she loved this careful, terrible man, and she thought about what his face would do, and then what his hands would do after his face was done. He would not shout. He would make 3 calls. By morning, there would be men in a room somewhere and a list of names, and the machine would start to turn, and the thing she was protecting, the soft new thing the size of a lentil, would light up in the middle of all that motion like a coal in a dark house. Someone had sent an envelope to make him do exactly that. She would not hand them the match. "Talk to me," he said. "I'm tired, Taehyun. That's all it is." He turned his head and looked at her fully then, and for a moment, she was sure he saw straight through the sunglasses she wasn't even wearing, straight down to the bottom. "You've been tired for a week. People get tired. You flinch when the intercom sounds." She hadn't known he'd noticed that. She kept her face still, which was its own kind of tell, and she watched him file it. "The buzzer's loud," she said. "It's always been loud." He was quiet a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gone lower and gentler, and that was worse. If someone said something to you, if someone came to the door, or called, or... He stopped. He rubbed his thumb across his knuckles, once. "I can make it stop. Whatever it is, you know that." "There's nothing to stop, Yara. There's nothing." She reached over and put her hand on his forearm, over the wrist, over the steel watch, and made herself smile with her whole face, because a half smile he would not believe. "You're carrying work home in your shoulders. Go shower, I'll heat the rice." He let her move him. He always let her move him at the last inch, which was the thing that undid her, because it meant the wall she was building held only because he chose to stand behind it and pretend not to see the bricks. He went to shower. She heated rice, she watched him fail to eat, and they sat across the small table, and the silence between them had a texture now, a grain, and she felt him reading it as distance, as her pulling back, as a door closing that he had not closed and could not find the handle of. She let him think it. Letting him think it was the cruelest thing she had ever done to him, and the only shield she had, and she held it up between his love and their child, and did not put it down. The next days ran the same and worse. The sedan varied its space but never its window, always the quarter hour after 7, always the nose south. Twice it was a different sedan, dark blue, then gray again, and the sameness of the difference told her more than a single car ever could. This was resourced. This was a rota, like Beck was a rota, and rotas came from budgets, and budgets came from someone inside the house who had a reason to spend. Beck was always one room too close. He was cleared, so he had a badge for the service corridor, and she began to learn the sound of him. The slightly rubbery step of the driving gloves he never took off, the fine ring of the earpiece feedback when he stood near a hard surface. He was in the lobby when she came down. He was by the mailboxes when she came up. Once she stepped onto her own floor, and he was at the far end of the hall by the stair door, and when she looked at him, he lifted a hand to the wall panel as if checking a sensor, and smiled the smile that stopped at his cheekbones, and said, "All good, Mrs. C.O." And she said, "All good," and let herself in, and stood with her back against the door until her legs stopped shaking. She changed nothing they could see. She kept her routines. She bought her water and her ginger candy. She talked to her mother on the phone in the bright registers of a woman with nothing to report. The weather, the neighbor's dog, whether the flight in spring should be morning or afternoon. And she said to the moon at the end, and she hung up and pressed the phone to her mouth, and breathed until the wanting to tell passed. But under the surface, she was doing the only work available to her. She watched. She wrote times in the paperback in her small column of numbers. She noticed which mornings Beck was fresh-shaved and which mornings he wasn't, because a man who slept in the building watched you differently than a man who went home. She noticed that the intercom's little courier chime had a different pitch than the resident buzzer, and she taught herself to tell them apart with her eyes shut so that fear could at least be accurate. And she moved the second envelope. Not far. She took the cardboard tube from the coat closet, behind the umbrellas, and she stood in the middle of the room turning it in her hands, and she understood that the coat closet was exactly the kind of place a person who searched apartments searched first. So she carried the rolled paper into the kitchen and slid it down inside the long, narrow gap between the fridge and the cabinet, the dead space no cleaning reached, and she wedged it with a folded dishcloth so it wouldn't fall and rattle. One secret in the art book. One secret behind the fridge. Never two in the same grave. Then she stood at the window on the 9th night of knowing and watched the space beside the hydrant, and it was empty because it was after dark and the car kept daylight hours like an honest employee. And she thought about the shape of the trap with a clarity that frightened her more than any of it. They were not trying to hurt her. If they had wanted to hurt her, they'd had 100 mornings. They were trying to make her run, to make her scream, to make her show Taehyun the envelope, to make him turn the house upside down looking for a leak while the real thing moved somewhere else in the confusion. She was the match. The baby was the fuse, and the only way to beat a fuse was to refuse to be lit. Behind her, the door opened. Taehyun's keys landed in the dish. He stopped just inside, coat still on, and looked at her standing dark against the darker glass. And she saw in the set of his shoulders that tonight the wall between them had finally become something he meant to walk through. "Come away from the window," he said quietly. "You stand there every night now." She didn't turn. Her hand found the edge of the curtain the way it always did. "There's a car," she almost said. The words came all the way up to her teeth. She swallowed them whole and felt them go down like glass. "I like the lights," she said instead, and heard how thin it was, and knew, from the long silence behind her, that this time he had not decided to pretend. He did not ask again that night. He crossed the room, set his keys back in the dish, and stood beside her at the glass without touching her. For a while, they watched the empty parking space together, two shapes against the city, and she let him think it was the lights. Then he went to bed. She heard the mattress take his weight, heard him wait for her, heard the weight become sleep. She stayed at the window until her feet went cold. The days after that folded into each other. She kept the visible routines and buried the invisible ones. And somewhere in the folding, the pregnancy stopped being a lentil and started being a weight she carried differently, a slowness in how she stood, a new caution in the way she came downstairs. 11 days now, 12. The number climbed, and the fear climbed with it, and neither of them told Taehyung anything. The craving started on the 4th night of not sleeping. It came the way hunger comes to someone who has forgotten she has a body. Sudden, total, specific. Not food in general. One thing. The jar of pickles on the second shelf of the refrigerator door. The ones the housekeeper bought for a stew nobody made. She thought about them lying in bed. She thought about them with her eyes closed. She thought about them until thinking became standing, and standing became walking, and she was in the kitchen in the dark before she had decided to be. The refrigerator light was the only light. She opened the jar over the sink so the smell wouldn't reach the bedroom. The brine was cold and sharp and exactly right. She ate one standing up, then another, her back to the hallway, her free hand braced on the counter. It was past midnight. She had checked, the way she checked everything now. The apartment was quiet in the way that meant Taehyun was down the hall and the building was asleep, and the street below held only a parked car she could no longer see from here. She reached into the jar for a third. "Why are you craving pickles at midnight?" Her hand stopped in the brine. She had not heard him. That was the thing that frightened her first. Before the question landed, she had not heard him come down the hall. And she heard everything now. The courier chime from the buzzer, the door gloves from the earpiece feedback, the difference between a man who had slept in the building and a man who hadn't. She had built her whole survival around hearing, and he had crossed the apartment and she had missed it. She turned. He stood at the edge of the kitchen in the black sweater and the dark trousers, barefoot, the tail of the koi lost under his collar. He was not accusing. That was the worst of it. His face held the mild, ordinary curiosity of a husband who had woken to an empty bed and followed the refrigerator light and found his wife eating pickles from the jar with a fork she hadn't bothered to get. "You couldn't sleep," he said, answering himself, giving her the exit before she'd asked for one. She should have taken it. She had taken 100 like it. Bad dreams. It's nothing. I like the lights. She had a whole architecture of small exits, and she knew every door in it. She froze instead. It was a small thing, a fraction of a second too long before she moved. The fork lowered a beat too slow. Her eyes went, for one instant, to the wrong place. Not to him, not to the floor, but to the middle distance. The place a person looks when they are calculating what a sentence will cost. He saw it. She watched him see it. She watched the curiosity go out of his face and something else come into it. Something that started in the eyes and worked outward, slow, the way frost works across a window. He was not a man who arrived at conclusions loudly. He arrived the way water arrives under a door. "How long?" he said. "Not." "How long have you not been sleeping?" "Not." "How long has your stomach been bad?" The question had no object, because they both knew its object now, and putting a word to it would have been a kind of retreat. "Taehyun." "How long, Yara?" She set the jar down. The small domestic clink of glass on granite was enormous. She could still lie. The thought moved through her fast and cold. She could say the word. "Flu?" She could say. "I'm late. It's nothing. Women are late." She could throw a smaller truth over the larger one and buy another week. She had bought weeks with less. Her whole recent life was a ledger of purchased silence. But he had crossed the apartment without her hearing him, and she understood, standing there with pickle brine on her fingers, that the silence had run out of things she could buy with it. He was already inside the thing. Some part of him had known for days, and had been waiting at the door the way she waited at the window. "Sit down," she said. "I don't want to sit down. Please." He didn't sit. He came instead to the counter and put both hands flat on it, an arm's length from her, and looked at her across the small, cold country of the kitchen. The refrigerator, still open, ticked and hummed at her hip. She reached back without looking and closed it, and the dark came up around them both, and they stood in it. 9 weeks, she said. Little more. She heard him not breathe. She made herself keep going, before the not breathing could become a question, because, if he got to ask the questions first, she would never get the envelope out into the light, and the envelope was the whole reason she had held her tongue this long. "I've known 9 days, she said. "I took the test in the morning. You were asleep." His hands stayed flat on the counter. His jaw worked once, a small motion, the koi shifting under the collar, and then, she watched it. She would remember watching it for the rest of her life. Happiness moved through him, just for a moment. It broke over the frost like sun over ice, involuntary, before the man in him could get in front of it. His weight came off his hands, his head lifted, Some door she had never once seen open in 3 years came open in his face, and behind it was a boy she had never met, a boy who had just been handed a thing he did not know he wanted until it was already in his hands. He started to say her name in a different voice, and she reached back into the drawer beside the stove, past the long decorative matches, to the false floor she'd cut into the lining 2 nights ago because she had known, that when this moment came she would need the proof within reach, and not behind the refrigerator where she could not get to it fast enough. She put the envelope on the counter between them. He looked at it. Cream paper, her name in careful blue capitals, the crease where a courier's rubber band had written it. He did not touch it. The boy was still in his face. The boy had nowhere to go. "Open it," she said. "What is this? Open it, Taehyun." He turned it over the way she had turned it over, holding it at the edges the way a man holds a thing he has been trained to hold at the edges, and she understood in that small trained motion how much of him she still didn't know. He slid the paper out with 2 fingers. The photocopy, gray and grained, her own test rendered in another machine's cheap toner, the 2 lines unmistakable even in the refrigerator dark, and beneath it, the hand that was not hers, that was not his, the flat blue capitals, "Someone already knows." The boy went out of his face. She had wondered, in the days of holding this, how it would go, whether he would rage, whether he would go still, whether he would reach for a phone before he reached for her. She had built the whole silence around one certainty, that his first move would be loud, and that loud was exactly what the envelope wanted. She had held her tongue for 9 days to keep him quiet. He was quiet now. She had never seen a quiet like it. It was the quiet of a man doing very fast arithmetic and arriving somewhere he did not want to be. "When," he said. "The night of the dinner." It came to the locker downstairs. A courier, no name. "You had it that night." "Yes, you've had it." He stopped. She watched him lay it against the calendar in his head, against every night he'd come home to the wall. Every. "It's nothing." Every window she'd stood at with a car in her sightline and a lie in her mouth. "You've had it the whole time." Yes. Something crossed his face that was worse than anger. She had braced for anger. Anger she could have stood in front of. This was the look of a man realizing that the distance he'd been grieving for 2 weeks had been a wall she was building on purpose, brick by brick, to protect him, and that she had been more alone inside their marriage than he had let himself imagine, and that she had chosen it. "You didn't tell me," he said. "No. You were afraid of me." "No." She said it fast, and then heard how untrue the "no" was, and corrected it, because he deserved the corrected version. "I was afraid of what you'd do. What you'd do would tell them where to look. It would tell them what the softest thing in this house is." Her hand went, without her permission, flat against her own stomach. It would point right at it. He looked at her hand. He looked at her hand for a long time, and she saw the second thing arrive in him, the thing under the hurt, the thing she had needed him to see and had spent 9 days praying he would not see too fast. His eyes went from her hand to the envelope to the window and its invisible street, and she watched him understand what she had understood on the 9th night, that whoever wrote those 3 words had not written them to hurt her. They had written them to move her, to make her run to him, to make him loud. "They wanted me to find out like this," he said slowly, "in the dark, angry. Yes. They wanted me to tear the house apart. Yes." Her voice cracked on it, finally, after all the flat yeses. "That's why I didn't tell you. I couldn't let them have your first move. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't." "How deep," he said, and now something had changed in his voice, and it frightened her more than the hurt had, because the hurt had been human, and this was not. This was the register he used for men she had never met, in rooms she had never seen, to photograph a test, in this apartment, in your hiding place, and then put it back. He set the photocopy down with a care that was its own kind of violence. They walked through cleared security. They stood in our home. They touched the thing you hid, and they hid it again, so you wouldn't know they'd been there. His hands had gone flat on the counter again, but they were not resting now. That's not a threat from outside, Yara. Nobody outside gets that close. The kitchen was very cold. She had closed the refrigerator, and the dark was complete, and the two of them stood in it on either side of a piece of cheap paper. "It's someone in," he said. It was not a question, and she did not answer it, and the not answering was the loudest thing either of them had said. Down in the street, in the space beside the hydrant she could not see from the kitchen, she knew without looking that the parked car had a nose pointed south, and a schedule, and a man in it who reported to someone who ate at her husband's table, and her husband, who believed with his whole ruined certainty that protection meant control, stood in his own dark kitchen and understood for the first time that the thing he could not control had already been in the room. Yara. His voice had come back down, all the way down, to something almost gentle, which was how she knew it was the most dangerous it had been all night. Who has been in this apartment? She thought of the list she had made on the floor in the dark. The housekeeper of 11 years, the maintenance men in June, the window technicians, the new man in the lobby with the driving gloves he never took off. She thought of all of it, and she opened her mouth and found she did not know, yet, which of the names to give him, or whether giving him any of them would light the very fuse she had spent 9 days refusing to light. "That's the wrong question," she said. He waited. "You want to know who was in the apartment." She pushed the photocopy an inch toward him with one finger, the 2 gray lines, the 3 blue words. "I've been asking that for 9 days. It's the question they want. You asking. It sends you running through the staff with a light, and while you do that, the thing that's really moving gets to keep moving in the dark." She held his eyes. "The right question is why. Why now? Why did somebody wait until there was a baby to make a move they could have made any morning for a year?" He did not answer, but she saw the question land, saw it displace the hunt in him the way a stone displaces water, and for the first time in 9 days she was not carrying the weight alone. It was a terrible thing to set down. She had not known how heavy it was until it left her hands and settled onto the counter between them, onto both of them, onto the small, cold country of the kitchen, where a husband and a wife stood over a photograph of their child's first proof and understood, at the same moment, that the child had not started this. The child had only started the clock. "Don't move against anyone," she said. "Not yet. Not tonight. Yara, promise me. If you move loud, they win the first round, and I don't know what the second one costs." She reached across the paper and put her hand over his, the first time she had touched him in days, and felt how still he held it, how much stillness it took. "You crossed the whole apartment and I didn't hear you," she said. "Do you understand what that means? I hear everything now, and I didn't hear you. That's how good they are. So we don't run, we watch. We let them think the envelope worked, and I ran to you, and you tore the house apart looking for a traitor." Her fingers tightened over his, "and instead, we find out what they're really reaching for." Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocked and settled. The refrigerator ticked in its dark. Taehyun turned his hand over under hers, slowly, until they were palm to palm, and looked down at the 2 hands and the paper beneath them, and when he spoke again, the boy was gone, and the frost was gone, and what was left was something colder and steadier than either. 9 weeks, he said. A little more. And you carried this alone? Yes. He lifted her hand and pressed it, briefly, against his mouth. Not the forehead, not the practiced husband's gesture, but her knuckles, the ones that had held the fork, the jar, the envelope, all of it. And then he set it down gently on the counter and stepped back, and she watched him become, in front of her, the man the city was afraid of, the quiet one, the one who did not arrive at conclusions loudly. Then we do it your way, he said. We watch. He looked at the window, at the street he could not see. But understand me. Someone stood in the room where you sleep. Someone touched the thing you hid. His eyes came back to her, and there was no gentleness left in them at all, only a promise made in a register she had never heard him use, low and level and final. When we find them, she said, we do it right. Not with blood, with proof. Blood is what they're expecting. He looked at her for a long moment, this woman he had married and thought he had learned, standing in his kitchen at 1 a.m, with brine on her fingers and a plan already older than his rage. You've thought about this, he said. I've had 9 days, she said, and a car outside my window, and no one to tell. She picked up the photocopy, folded it once along its worn crease, and held it out to him. Now I have you. Don't waste it being loud. He took the paper, and for the first time since he had asked her why she was craving pickles at midnight, neither of them was pretending, and the apartment around them was not a home but a board, and every piece on it had just been shown to be closer than they'd known. The first man they took was the doorman who had worked the night shift for 6 years. Yara learned it the way she learned everything now, from what stopped happening. The old man was gone from the lobby by Tuesday. A younger face stood where he used to stand, and the younger face did not meet her eyes. She had told Taehyun to watch. He had agreed, and then something had turned in him during the 4 days after she showed him the envelope, something she had felt but not been able to name until she saw the empty chair by the service door. You said we would watch, she said, that night. She stood in the kitchen with her back to the counter. Her hand had drifted to her stomach again, without her deciding it. Taehyun was still in his coat. He had not sat. I am watching. The doorman is being spoken to. He's 61. She kept her voice flat. He carries my mother's boxes up when she visits. He hums. Then he has nothing to fear. He said it the way men say things they have stopped believing. She looked at the koi on his neck, at the place where the tail vanished under his collar, and she understood that the promise had not survived the walk from the kitchen to the elevator that first night. He had told her he would use proof, but a man who believed protection was control could not sit still inside a house where someone had touched his wife's secret and put it back to mock him. Who told you to start with the staff? She said. He didn't answer fast enough. Taehyun, who? Doyoon offered to help. The name landed in the kitchen like a dropped plate. She had heard it for 3 years. Always at a distance, always a voice on the other end of a call Taehyun took in the other room. Always the man who sent wine at the New Year and never came himself. Jung Do-yoon. Pinstripe and a signet ring, and a scar through one eyebrow. The one everyone called uncle and no one called friend. He offered, she repeated. He knows people. He can move quietly where I can't be seen to move. And you said yes. I said I would consider it. He set his keys in the dish. The small sound was too loud. By morning he had already started. She closed her eyes. There it was. Not a mistake Taehyun made. A door Taehyun opened 1 inch, that another hand had pushed the rest of the way. Do-yoon came to the apartment on the 3rd day of the purge. He filled the doorway the way heavy men learn to, taking his time, letting the room adjust to him. He kissed the air beside Yara's cheek and called her the daughter of the house, and put a box of pears on the counter with both hands, gently, as if the pears were the reason he had climbed 14 floors. "You look tired," he told her. "This is not good, in your condition." Her spine went cold. She had told no one but Tae-hyun. She held her face still and poured him tea he had not asked for. Do-yoon watched her pour. "A house with a secret is a house with a hole in the wall," he said. "The wind gets in, we patch it." "That is all I am doing here, patching." By questioning the cleaning woman, Yara said. "Ah," he smiled with the lower half of his face. "Okay, Ja, 11 years. And in 11 years, who has stood closest to your shelves? Who dusts the books no one reads?" He lifted the tea. "Loyalty and access are not the same thing, daughter. The most loyal hand can be bought once, at the right price, on the right week." She has grandchildren in Daegu. Everyone has something in Daegu. He drank. "That is the price, you see." He set the cup down and turned it a quarter turn on the counter, aligning the handle to some private grid only he could see. "You Americans think loyalty is a feeling," he said. "In this house, it is a ledger. Every man is loyal until the number is large enough. My job is to find whose number came due." He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. "You would be surprised how small the number can be when a man is frightened, a cleaner, a driver, a wife far from home who misses her mother." "I don't miss my mother," Yara said. "I call her. Of course." He smiled again, only the lower half. "That is what I mean. You are careful. Careful people are the most interesting to watch." Tae-hyun stood by the window through all of it, saying little, and Yara understood the geometry of the room without needing it drawn. Do-yoon spoke. Tae-hyun listened. And every name Do-yoon offered up as a suspect was a name that owed nothing to Do-yoon and everything to Tae-hyun. The doorman, the cleaner, the man who fixed the window sensors, the accountant's assistant, people with no power, people no one would fight to protect. He is not hunting the traitor, she thought. He is thinning the room. He is walking through the house, pointing at everyone who might notice him, and calling them the danger. She said none of it. She refilled his tea. That night, after Do-yoon left his cologne behind in the hallway, she told Tae-hyun the truth she had been building all day. "He named 5 people," she said. "Count them. Not one of them could hurt you. Every one of them could see him." Tae-hyun stood very still. "The doorman watches who comes and goes. The cleaner knows which rooms are used. The sensor man knows how the alarms are wired." She kept her voice level, the way you keep a hand level carrying something full. "He is not finding your leak. He is removing your witnesses, and you handed him the keys." She watched it reach him. She watched the quiet man go quieter, which in him was the sound of something breaking. He turned to the window and put one hand flat against the glass, and for a long moment, he was a man looking down at a city he suddenly did not trust to hold his weight. "Then I stop it," he said. "You can't stop it now. If you pull him back, he knows you see him. And a man like that, cornered, moves faster." She came to stand near him, not touching. "He's already told the family there's a rot in your house. If he can't hang it on the doorman, he hangs it on me. On you. The foreign wife, the one who came from nowhere. The pregnant one who changed everything." She said it plainly, because plainly was the only way it didn't cut. "I'm the easiest story to tell. A man loses control of his house. Where do they always look first? At the woman who wasn't supposed to be there." Tae-hyun's hand curled against the glass. "So we give him a story he can't use," she said. He turned. "What story?" She had been carrying it for a day, turning it over the way she'd turned over the matches at the sink weeks ago, deciding whether to burn something. "We fight," she said. Loud enough for the walls, loud enough for whoever listens, and I leave. No, you throw me out, or I run. It doesn't matter which, as long as it's ugly, and it's public, and it's about me, not about him, she swallowed. A wife who found out what her husband is and couldn't take it. That's a story the whole family will believe in an afternoon, because it's the story they already want. It has nothing to do with a traitor. It puts the hole in the wall on me, and it takes the target off every person he just named. And where do you go? His voice had dropped to almost nothing. Pregnant. Alone. Out there. Somewhere no one guards. Which is the only place no one will look. She made herself hold his eyes. If I stay behind your men, I'm behind your men. Everyone knows exactly where I am, and exactly how much you'll burn to keep me. That's the leash Do-yoon wants around your neck. The moment I'm loose and unwatched, I'm the one thing on this board he can't price. You are talking about being unprotected. I'm talking about being invisible. She took his hand off the glass, held it in both of hers. You keep the men. You keep them looking foolish, chasing a marriage that fell apart. And I go find the one thing you can't find from inside this house. I find out why now, why the baby, why they moved when they did. He looked at their joined hands as if they belonged to other people. You wanted blood, she said, softer. This is the opposite. This is me walking out the door with nothing, so that later we walk back in with everything. But I can't do it if you come after me. The second you send a car, it's over. You have to let me be gone. Actually gone. It has to hurt to watch, or no one believes it. For a long time he said nothing at all. Outside, somewhere below, a car she couldn't see, idled at a curb she couldn't see. How long? He finally asked. The same 2 words he'd used in the kitchen the night she told him. How long? As long as it takes. They staged it over the following days, the way you build a fire you intend to survive. Carefully, from the outside in. She let herself be seen crying in the lobby. She let a raised voice carry through a door left an inch open when she knew the new doorman was near enough to hear. She packed a bag in front of the window with the curtains wide so that the gray sedan, wherever it sat now, would have something to photograph that told the story they wanted told. The hardest part was Tae-hyun learning to perform coldness. He had spent 3 years arranging himself around her comfort, and now she needed him harsh, needed the version of him the family already feared. They practiced it once, quietly, in the dark of the bedroom. Say the worst thing, she told him. The thing a man says when he's done. He couldn't. His mouth opened and closed. She took his face in her hands. Then don't say it to me. Say it to the room, to the walls. Aim it past me. And the next morning, when Okja was in the kitchen, and the new doorman lingered by the service door with a clipboard he didn't need, Tae-hyun stood in the hall and said, loud and flat, that he should never have brought a stranger into his family. And Yara let the words hit her like they were true, and let her own voice climb and break, and somewhere behind the wall a phone was surely already lifting to carry the news up the chain. She hated how good he was at it once he found the aim. She hated more how much it took out of him. He came to bed that night and lay with his back to her, shaking, and she pressed her spine to his and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the walls should hear. And on the last morning she put on the coat. It was not a coat from her old life. Camel-colored, long, bought plain and paid for in cash. Over a black turtleneck, black trousers, white sneakers she could walk far in. The brown band still crossed her forehead. The gold hoop still hung at her ear. The glasses still sat heavy on her nose. She had given up nothing that was hers. She had only stopped looking like a woman who had a house to lose. Tae-hyun watched her dress from the bedroom door and did not offer to carry the bag. If it goes wrong, he started. It won't be because you came for me. If it goes wrong, he said again, and stopped, because the quiet man had run out of the small distance between what he felt and what he could say. She crossed to him. She put her hand on the side of his neck, over the koi, and she felt his pulse under her palm, fast, betraying the still face. "You're the only person in this building who knows I'm not really leaving you," she said. "Hold on to that. Everyone else has to believe I am." His jaw moved. "Even your mother." That one she had not let herself think about until he said it. She stepped back. Her phone was already ringing when she reached the door, as if Eleanor had felt the shape of the day from an ocean away, the way mothers do. Yara answered in the hallway, bag on her shoulder, because if she sat down in that apartment to take the call, she would not get up. "Baby, what's happening?" Eleanor's voice came thin and fast. "Somebody called me. Somebody I don't know called my house and told me you left him." "Yara, tell me that's not true." Yara closed her eyes. So it had already traveled. Do-yoon, or one of Do-yoon's, reaching across the ocean to a woman in Savannah to make the story land where it would hurt loudest, to watch it hurt. "Mama," she said. "Don't you mama me? Are you leaving that man? Where are you? Why do you have a bag? I can hear the bag. I can hear you walking. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not understand." Yara's throat closed, and she pushed the words through it. "For a little while, everything you hear about me is going to be bad, and I need you to believe some of it, out loud, where people can hear you believe it." A silence stretched over 4,000 miles. "You're in trouble." Eleanor was crying now. Yara could hear the change in the air, the wet catch at the end of the words. "Lord, you're pregnant, and you're in trouble, and you're telling me to help you lie about it." Yara's hand went flat against her stomach. "I'm telling you, I'm handling it." "By yourself, out a door, with a bag." Her mother's voice broke fully. "I raised you to walk toward people, not away from them. I'm walking toward the only thing that keeps the baby safe. It just looks like a way." She was at the elevator now. She pressed the button and watched the number climb toward her. "Mama, to the moon." Eleanor did not say it back. She wept into the phone, thousands of miles off. In a plum blouse, in a bright kitchen, Yara could see perfectly with her eyes closed. And the not saying was the worst sound Yara had heard in 9 weeks. "To the moon," Yara said again, and it came out cracked. "And back," her mother finally whispered, ruined. "You come back. You hear me. You come back." The elevator opened. Yara stepped in. She did not look toward the apartment door. She knew Taehyun was standing inside it. She knew he would stay there, still, until the doors closed and the car began to fall, and she knew that staying still while she went down alone was the hardest thing she had ever asked a man who believed love meant standing between her and the world. The doors closed on her reflection. The band, the glasses, the hoop, the plain new coat. 14 floors down, she crossed the lobby where the old doorman no longer stood. The new one looked at her and then, deliberately, looked away, and she let him. She let him see a woman leaving with a bag. She let the camera in the ceiling dome see it too. She pushed through the doors into the street, where the gray sedan was not parked by the hydrant, because it did not need to be anymore. She had walked out of the frame on her own. She turned south. She did not know yet where she was going. She only knew that somewhere in this city was the hand that had photographed her test and mailed it back, and that the hand had wanted her out here, loose and frightened and alone. She meant to find out why it had gotten exactly what it wanted. The phone in her pocket had gone silent. Her mother's crying still sat in her ear. She pulled the coat tighter, put one hand under the bag strap, the other flat over the small weight at her middle, and started walking into a part of the city where no one knew her name, no one guarded her door, and no one, for the first time in 3 years, was standing between her and whatever came next. Yara found the accountant on the fourth day, in a laundromat 6 neighborhoods from the apartment, folding towels that weren't hers. She had traced the paper backward, the way you trace a river to its spring, the envelope's blue capitals, the courier that required no signature. A courier that took cash and asked nothing worked one street. Yara had stood in that street 2 mornings, buying nothing, watching who fed the man jobs. A woman in a grage blazer, a leather satchel held close, had handed him a slim package on the second morning and walked south without once turning her head. Yara had followed her south. South, always south, the direction the sedan's nose had pointed for 100 mornings. Now the woman sat under fluorescent light, matching corners, a Coke bottle rinse of gray at her temple, a small mole near her left jaw, reading glasses without rims. She did not look up when Yara sat 2 chairs down. "You walk slower than you used to," the woman said. "That's new." Yara kept both hands in her coat pockets. "You're Han Soo-jin." "I've been Han Soo-jin for 41 years. She set a folded towel on the stack. "You found me faster than I planned for." "That's either luck or you're better than they think. I'd bet the second." "You photographed my test." "I did." "You were in my home. Once, 12 minutes. Soo-jin turned then, and her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I put it back exactly. I hope you noticed. I wanted you to keep trusting the hiding place. I needed you to keep something." Yara took the folded photocopy from her coat and laid it on the plastic chair between them. The 2 gray lines, the 1 blue sentence. Someone already knows. Soo-jin looked at it and did not reach for it. "You kept it. Good. People burn the thing that frightens them. Then they have nothing. You wanted to scare me. I wanted to warn you." She said it flat, the way you correct a number. "There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. If I'd wanted to hurt you, you'd have never seen the car. You'd have never seen me. You'd have opened your art book one morning, and the test would simply be gone, and a week later, something would go wrong with the pregnancy, in a way 3 doctors would call natural." The dryers turned. Yara's throat moved once. "That's what was coming," Soo-jin said. "That's what I was trying to stand in front of." Yara's hand pressed flat over the small weight at her middle before she knew it had moved. Soo-jin watched the hand and something in her face loosened. "You do that when you're afraid," the accountant said. "You should stop. It tells people where to aim. You'd know. I've made a career of watching where people put their hands." Soo-jin folded the last towel and did not stand. 41 years of being the woman no one turns to look at. It's a kind of invisibility. It's also a kind of weapon, if you live long enough to learn to hold it. They walked, because a moving conversation is harder to record. Soo-jin set the pace, satchel across her body, one hand always on the flap. "I keep the books," she said. "All of them, the real ones and the ones we show. 14 years. I know what every man in that family is worth to the dollar, and I know which of them are worth less than they spend." She turned a corner without looking back, a habit worn into her. 11 months ago, the numbers started lying to me. Small. A vendor paid twice. A property that carried a mortgage the family didn't need. A security contract that cost 4 times a security contract. "Bake," Yara said. Soo-jin's mouth tightened, not quite a smile. "You noticed him. He was always 1 room too close. He was placed. He reports to Jung Do-yoon, not to your husband, though your husband signs his check." She stopped at a crossing, waited for nothing, crossed. "That's what money does that blood can't. Blood you have to convince. Money you just move." Someone was moving it, skimming a little from 40 streams, and 40 littles make an army you can pay to look the other way on the one morning you need them looking the other way. A coup. The word felt strange in Yara's mouth, old and theatrical, and entirely real. They don't call it that. They call it succession. But yes, Sujin's hand pressed the satchel flat. Do-yoon and 3 others under him. They've been building it for a year. Buying men. Buying silence. Buying the room your husband will one day stand in when the family council decides who leads after him, or instead of him. Yara walked 3 steps before she trusted her voice. Then why the envelope? Why me? Why now? Sujin stopped fully, turned, looked at her the way an accountant looks at the line that finally balances. Because of the baby, she said. You already worked it out. I can see you did. Tell me anyway. An heir changes the arithmetic. She said arithmetic, like a person who had loved a thing her whole life and watched it be used for cruelty. The moment there's a child, your husband stops being a man they can replace and starts being a bloodline they'd have to erase. Do-yoon had a year of patient work planned. Slow, clean, a vote, not a war. Her jaw set. Your pregnancy took the year away from him. Once there's a child, waiting only makes the target harder to reach. So he had to move early. Sloppy. Now, before you're far enough along for the whole family to have gathered around you and made you untouchable. The street noise thinned to nothing in Yara's ears. The pregnancy didn't start any of it, Sujin said, gentler now. It was already there, in the books, growing for 11 months. The baby only lit the fuse they'd already laid. And when I saw the fuse catch, when I saw Do-yoon start pulling security around your building and pulling the old doorman's schedule and asking after your doctor, I did the only thing a woman with no army can do. She touched the folded photocopy still in Yara's hand. I sent you a match and prayed you were the kind who doesn't strike it. Yara's fingers closed over the paper. You wanted me not to tell him. I wanted you not to make him loud. Sujin's eyes held hers. A loud man tears his own house apart, looking for a traitor, and hands Do-yoon every knife he needs. You didn't. You went quiet, and you went hunting. Do you know how rare that is? I bet on it, and I still didn't believe it. Yara didn't go home that night. She went to a phone. Her mother answered on the first ring, the way she'd been answering every call for weeks. Breath already caught. It's me, Yara said. I'm all right. The baby's all right. Eleanor made a sound that wasn't a word. Mama, listen. The thing you said in the lobby, that I left him, I need you to keep saying it. A little longer. Then it's done, and I promise you I come home to something better than what I left. You come back, Eleanor said, fierce through the tears. That's the only promise I'm holding. To the moon. And back, Yara said. I know. I'm walking toward you, not away. You raised me to walk toward people. I heard you. She brought it to Taehyun the way Sujin had brought it to her. Not the words, the paper. They met where no one watched. A service stairwell in a building the family didn't own. He came in the charcoal graphite suit, first button open, and when he saw her his whole face did the thing it had done in the kitchen, the boy under the quiet, and she had to look away to say what she'd come to say. She didn't say it. She handed him the satchel. Han Soo-jin had given it to her that afternoon. Both sets of books, the real and the shown. 11 months of small lies, laid side by side, so the shape between them became a knife, pointed at one man. Yara had added her own page, the paperback with the column of times down its back. 7:09, 7:22, 7:11, 7:16, 7:14, 100 mornings of a car that was paid for out of a security contract that cost 4 times a security contract. Taehyun read standing up. He read for a long time. His face went somewhere she couldn't follow and came back harder. Do-yoon, he said. And 3 under him. It's in the columns. Soo-jin will testify to the council. She's wanted to for 11 months. She needed someone who wouldn't get her killed first. His hand tightened on the satchel. I want to. I know what you want. She stepped close, put her hand flat on his chest. over the open button, over the koi. You want blood. Blood is the vote he's already bought. Half the men in that room owe him money. If you go in with a knife, you're the loud husband who lost his mind when his wife left, and they'll pity Do-yoon and remove you, and it will all look like mercy. She pressed harder. You go in with the books. You make every man in that room watch him steal from them, not from you, from them. Then they do it for you, and they thank you for the paper. He looked down at her hand, at the small weight below it, further along now, undeniable. You planned this from the window, he said slowly. The night you told me to make it look like the envelope worked. They think I ran. They think you tore the house apart and found nothing and lost me for nothing. She almost smiled. A frightened, broken man doesn't audit anyone. So they got comfortable. And a comfortable man moves money he shouldn't, because he's sure no one's counting. Her hand fell away. Soo-jin's counting. She never stopped. The conspirators moved the accounts on a Thursday. They had to. The council was called for Friday. A routine gathering, Do-yoon's own suggestion, the perfect stage for a quiet succession, while the family's strange, half-widowed heir sulked somewhere across the city. To be ready to look clean, Do-yoon consolidated. He pulled the skimmed streams into 2 holdings, tidied the property, retired the double-paid vendor, closed the loop. He made the books balance, which meant, for one day, every dollar he'd ever stolen stood in 2 accounts with his sign on them. Soo-jin photographed the ledger at 4 a.m. by the light of her own desk lamp, the way she'd photographed a pregnancy test in 12 careful minutes. She had spent 14 years being the woman no one looked at twice. It had finally been worth something. Yara wore the charcoal dress to the council. Knit, high-necked, long-sleeved flats she could stand in for an hour. The brown band across her brow, the wide glasses, the thin gold hoop. She had chosen gray on purpose. Gray was the color of ledgers. She was not supposed to be there. That was the point. The room went still when she walked in beside Taehyun, the wife who'd left, upright, unbroken, visibly carrying, walking toward the men instead of away. Do-yoon's face did something small and fast before it settled into warmth. "Daughter of the house," he said, rising. "You were told what I needed you to hear," Yara said. Taehyun set the satchel on the long table and opened it, and Soo-jin walked in behind them, blazer buttoned, satchel of her own, and the room understood a half-second too late. Yara watched Do-yoon's hand find the table's edge. Taehyun spoke quietly, the way he always spoke, and quiet in that room was louder than any shout. He did not accuse. He laid out pages. He let the oldest men at the table read a vendor paid twice, a mortgage on a property that needed none, a security contract that cost 4 times a security contract, and then he laid down the 4 a.m. photograph, 2 accounts, 1 signature, every stolen stream flowing home. "He didn't steal from me," Taehyun said, and turned the page toward the men on Do-yoon's own side, the ones whose money it was. "He stole from you, for a year, to buy the room you're sitting in," Do-yoon said, Yara's name once, like a man reaching for a rail that wasn't there. She met his eyes and gave him nothing, the way he'd given the innocent nothing when he'd hung his suspicion on a doorman of 6 years and a cleaner of 11. "She's the one who left," Do-yoon tried, turning to the old men, spreading his hands. "Ask her husband. Ask the whole building, a frightened woman, a broken marriage. This is grief, not accounting. Then explain the 2 accounts," said the oldest man at the table, who had not spoken until now. He tapped the 4 a.m. photograph with 1 finger. Grief doesn't sign its name twice. Do-yoon's mouth opened and found nothing in it. Yara watched the warmth drain out of his face by degrees, the way water leaves a basin, until what was left was only the small, cold eyes and the scar through the brow, and a man who had counted on no one counting. It did not take long after that. It rarely does, when the money is on the table and the men who own it are in the room. No blood. Do-yoon was finished by paper, in an hour, by the same arithmetic he'd trusted to make him a king. It should have ended there. For Taehyun, it began there. That night he sat at the long table alone with the books, and did not close them. Yara found him there past midnight, sleeves pushed up, a pen in his hand, writing. "What are you doing?" she asked. "The thing that makes a child of mine into an heir," he said, not looking up, "is a set of mechanisms, trusts, signatures that pass automatically, a name that inherits a world whether it wants it or not." He turned a page. "I built some of them. I can unbuild them." She sat down across from him. "You'd stay powerful. You don't have to. I stay powerful." He looked at her then, and the boy was gone, and something steadier was in its place. "I don't hand it down like a curse. When our child is grown, there'll be a door out that I built on purpose. Not a wall, a door." He set the pen down. "You spent 100 mornings making sure no one could price you. I'm making sure no one can price the baby either." Yara put her hand over his on the ledger. He turned it and kissed her knuckles, the way he had in the kitchen the night everything stopped being a secret. Her mother's flight came in the spring, on a morning, direct, the way he'd promised, in the first gray hour of all of this, before either of them knew what they were carrying. Eleanor walked out of the gate, and Yara walked toward her, both hands out, and did not stop walking until there was no distance left at all. For 3 years, Yara had hidden the truest thing she owned inside a hollow book, because she was sure the man she married would treat their child as a piece to move on a board. She had been wrong about which man he was. The man she'd hidden the baby from turned out to be the only one in that whole world willing to burn the empire down to the ground to keep the child from ever having to. And she stood in the spring light, not held up by his power, but holding her own, a woman with a mother walking into her arms, a door built where a wall had been, and a future no one but her would ever get to price. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever hidden something precious from the one person who would have burned everything to protect it? Have you ever stayed silent, reading every quiet sign yourself, because speaking felt more dangerous than carrying the secret alone? And when the truth finally surfaced, did you find an enemy or the only ally you had? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about protection, hidden truth, and legacy, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.